All right, YouTube. Once again, the words of a politician do not quite match up with their actual actions. John Kerry telling a group of graduates to prepare for a borderless world. He apparently sees this as a good thing, denounces sort of the build the wall rhetoric of the so-called right wing. I'd like to point something out. Most often these same politicians, who almost invariably are white, oddly enough, or of a different sub-white ethnicity, let's face it, most often they live in lily-white upper-class neighborhoods where the token black is a Harvard PhD. The only black person who's ever been in John Kerry's house, other than the person who does his dishes, is probably Obama. These multi-millionaire and billionaire politicians, they don't even really care about the race issue beyond how they can exploit it. And that includes both those who use racial animosity to prop up a platform and those who use sort of the multiculturalism, diversity, whatever. Are you going to see John Kerry inviting a dozen Syrian refugees to his home? I mean, it's certainly large enough. He's probably got 3 or 4 houses, so he's got plenty of room. He's only living in one at a time, I would assume, or some government office somewhere, some government-built home in D.C., so he can sort of sit there and beat off and snort his cocaine and his ketchup mixed together, because after all, I believe he married the heiress of the Hines family, so he's big money. Is John Kerry going to move to Harlem? Is John Kerry going to move down to like the Valley in southern Texas, where it's like 99% Hispanic people? I bet his little community has plenty of gates and fences and walls in it. So why is it that that's okay for him? It's okay for someone who's like rich and out of touch to put a big old fence up around their home. Well, why should you do that? I thought you wanted to be among all these other different groups of people. Why haven't you adopted a dozen African children and invited some Syrian refugees to live in your, 5 or 6 car garage with the car elevator like Mitt Romney has? Why haven't you done all of these great things? Like Ted Cruz was down with Glenn Beck at the border giving out like teddy bears to immigrant children. That's very kind of you. You didn't pay for them yourself, but that's the way that it goes. Are you going to invite them as well to live with you, Mr. Cruz or Mr. Beck? You've certainly got the money to sponsor them. You could sponsor 100 of them, and be a good Christian like you always claim that you are, even though you're a Mormon heretic who most Christians believe is going to burn in a lake of fire for all eternity. When somebody like John Kerry opens their mouth, they often say something stupid. It's like Al Gore rambles about climate change. Reduce your carbon footprint. Well, he flies around on his own private jet, and I think he's got 2 of them, actually. It's hypocrisy, and the funny thing is, people are so indoctrinated into the partisan bullshit that they don't even point it out. It's like some idiot megachurch pastor who lives in a $5 million home ranting about being humble and charitable and giving to the poor. And meanwhile, they give pennies on the dollar, if anything, to the poor. They simply fundraise by making a few speeches. They don't dip into their own income to do that. They'll give a little bit back to their own church, to get themselves that extra gold-encrusted throne that they sit on while they're delivering a speech about how you should be poor because that means to be blessed or something. Or they preach some retarded prosperity gospel about if you just donate more of your money to me, you'll certainly get tenfold back. Then you'll be rich like me. You have to give to receive. Or some idiot message like that. These people are hypocrites. It doesn't matter what political classification they fall into. We've seen it probably more from the evangelicals than anybody else. But the modern day evangelist is somebody like Kerry or Gore or Obama. Somebody who is willing to talk the talk, not willing to walk the walk. We need to take care of the poor, they say, and yet their own investments are shielded from being taxed. They put it overseas. They put it in the Cayman Islands or Cyprus or Switzerland or something, and you never see any return on that. They get money from overseas. They get money from corporations and banks while spewing out about how they're gonna knock those corporations down a peg. Then they take a kickback from the oil lobby. We're gonna take care of banking so we don't have another fiscal crisis, they say, as they pocket a good $10 million from some bank, Goldman Sachs or something like that. These people are retarded. It doesn't matter which party they're in. I realized that long ago. But Kerry is the new face of hypocrisy. he's sort of the "you should die for your country even while I didn't have to die for mine" person. Don't have any respect for him, honestly. Also, he looks like he's like half moose or something. His face is longer than almost the rest of his body combined. I can't help it. You know, people say you shouldn't stoop to making like lowbrow insults. I understand that. It's not an intellectual argument, and I'm not trying to make one when I make fun of his appearance. But can I really ignore the fact that his chin is larger than the rest of his head? I can't. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. It's too funny to me. Blame me for it all you want. I'm still going to crack a joke at his expense. Maybe it's from all that ketchup. You know, I like ketchup too, although I didn't get rich off of, you know, owning a ketchup company, unfortunately. But then again, I'd run it into business. I'd be eating all of the production. I'd be eating all of the ketchup, and we'd go broke very quickly. Kerry is an awful lot like Mitt Romney. Someone who's really rich, pretends to be like average. I'm just like you, I like backyard barbecues. You know, the steaks I'm barbecuing cost more than your car, but I like the backyard barbecue. Don't mind the fact that my hot dog buns are coated in gold leaf, and the fact that this barbecue cost more than your fucking house. Don't mind these facts, I'm just like you. Romney had that problem. He looks and acts like John Kerry. They look and act like one another. And here he is hypocritically calling for a borderless world. Well, then what? Does the U.S. even exist at that point if we don't have any border at all? You're not talking about a porous border. You're not talking about amnesty and saying, oh, we need to forgive and forget because these people worked hard to get here. You're talking about an actual borderless society. This is something that like 10, 15 years ago, conspiracy theorists said, oh, soon they'll dissolve all national borders. And you're actually giving credence to the ideas spawned by the sort of people who unironically think that Alex Jones brand iodine is better than any other form of elemental iodine. You're actually giving credence to what they are saying. That's pretty sad. That's quite a difficult feat to accomplish. I never would have guessed that some randomly chosen, like David Icke, Illuminati, I'm wearing a tinfoil hat crazy from the 90s or like the early Bush era or even early Obama era would actually have something that they argued the point on borne out as true by a mainstream politician. It's insane to me that only in less than a single generation we've gone from fundamentally understanding, yes, nations need to have some sort of functional border system, to the point at which where you argue that ultimately mediocre, lukewarm nationalist line, you're not even saying that border has to be non-porous. You're just saying, well, we have to have something there. We have to have a nation of sorts at least, to the point where that is considered a form of bigotry. And somebody like Kerry takes it even further. He's taking it further than like the average Obama or Romney and saying, oh, well, forgive and forget on, you know, we can't deport all these people. Just, you know, give them a fucking green card. Just let them stay because they were already here to begin with. Okay, Kerry's taking it a step further, arguing for the erasing of all national borders. You think the Russians are going to do that? You think the Chinese are going to do that? I would have no problem, by the way, with the Western sort of allied, economically joined at the hip states having an open border style situation. Like even the EU situation. It's not a problem that Europeans can move between European states. Nobody ever felt that it was a problem. It only became a problem when one nation decides we're going to take millions of refugees, let them have free access to this same freedom of movement, and even though they're not even Europeans, we're just going to let them wander wherever they want unmonitored, because they're not being properly checked by any form of border situation. It would be the same if the United States were to apply the sort of scenario we have with Canada to Western Europe, or even East. I would rather apply it to Eastern Europe, honestly, nowadays. To Mexico. I don't care if people from Mexico without a visa simply want to walk across the border to go shopping. I don't fucking care, but you have to have a border there. You can't have people simply moving about wherever they want, regardless of what motives they might have, completely unchecked. The average person in any country doesn't feel that that's appropriate. I may not go around immediately judging somebody because they appear to be of a different culture or ethnicity or something. I've met people of British origin that have moved here to the Vermont area. They're like retirees and stuff. They speak with a British accent or a Scottish accent or whatever. I don't immediately assume, well, they must have, just overstayed some tourist visa or something. Nor did I think that when I was in southern Texas. I probably met dozens of illegal immigrants down there. But I don't fucking care. Nobody knifed me in the back. Nobody broke a bottle over my head. I tried to judge them as individuals. That doesn't mean we can forsake the very idea of a border. I like to believe, and I base this as an educated opinion, I've met people, both in person and many, many hundreds of people online, who are immigrants to various nations, who are not part of the currently mobile ethnic group that is mass immigrating into one of these states. You would think of someone of Indian origin who's living in Sweden and now sees a bunch of Pakistanis coming in. There's an animosity that is rooted in their origin, as opposed to the new wave of immigrants coming there. And so they have a problem with it, just as much as somebody who's been in the same country for the last 100 generations would have a problem. To the point where even last wave immigrants, a lot of them are from East Asia, from India, from certain parts of Latin America. Even they have a problem with it in many cases, specifically because of the types of immigrants coming across. The problem with the free movement that has been imposed by Europe is that the post-national governing authority overseeing the system has no regard for the actual cares and concerns of any of its member states. They don't care. They don't care if the Polish feel overwhelmed by 100,000 people storming across their land to and from Germany. They don't care if Belgium gets attacked. They don't care if Paris gets attacked. They don't care if London Bridge is burning down. They don't care about these things. They don't have to live among the same people they're inviting in. They live in gated communities and mansions and stuff like that. They have their own fallout bunkers. They don't care. It's like apply the old criticism of the atomic war, that the same people overseeing the expansion of atomic weaponry and the testing of atomic weaponry, they were privy to all. They had the iodine. They had the fallout bunkers. They had the guns, they had the tanks, they had the stockpiles of food and seeds and all of the other stuff you would need to survive a nuclear war. So for them, it was peanuts if the little people got nuked. Well, it's the same sort of thing right now with the mass immigration crisis of the Western world. Whether it's the United States, whether it's Europe, it doesn't really ultimately matter where you're talking about. It doesn't ultimately matter what group of immigrants are coming in. If 100 million Americans were to suddenly immigrate to Ghana and just absolutely wash it away, overwhelm it with Americans, don't you think that in the next elections, if the Ghanans just rolled over and said, okay, we're giving you all green cards, we don't care if you stay here, don't you think the next elections would be a little bit odd? Don't you think that those people would vote in their own best interest and vote in a government that either wanted to be annexed to the United States or establish a constitution that's basically identical, completely overrun the culture, there'd be McDonald's everywhere and everything? Don't you think that that would happen? Don't you think that if 10 million French people were to say, fuck this shit, we're leaving France, move back to some former French colony, they moved to Gabon or something, don't you think that if they were then don't you think there'd be problems there? Don't you think that the people who are part of that native culture would feel a little bit alienated? A little trickle of immigrants over time isn't going to piss them off. They're not going to care. It's when you have mass immigration, a massive total of immigration, that it becomes a social issue. Immigration into the United States, immigrants wouldn't be an issue in the U.S. if we had a cohesive border system that was actually policed so that we didn't have 10 million illegal immigrants in the country. I don't begrudge them residency. I don't care. But you gotta solve the border problem. You have to have a border. You have to have a wall on the border. You have to stop illegal immigration in the future. Can we do anything about the 10 million that are already here and mass deport them? No, it's not economically feasible. You'd have to violate several constitutional amendments in order to do so. And that doesn't even begin to address all the children of these illegals that have already been born here, that are going to be orphans that the state has to take care of. It would be a mess. Yeah, I don't care if they stay in this country, but at the same time, you have to prevent the problem in the future. The Europeans have taken no steps whatsoever to ameliorate the problem in the future. They didn't address the fundamental root cause of why these refugees existed in the first place. They have failed to address the root cause of why economic migrants can blend in with the refugees, come over, be treated the same, never leave, break laws, take the welfare system for granted, beat people in the streets, riot, rape women. They have done nothing. Even if you assume that it is a small minority of economic migrants doing these things, and as far as welfare goes, of course, we know that's not the case. Let's assume that only like 1% of these people actually commit any crimes at all. They're still going to be used, those stories, as propaganda, whether it's well-intentioned or malintent is considered therein. It's still going to be used as propaganda by those who don't want any immigrants at all. They want like nationalism, literal skinheads or something, or at least cultural nationalism. Of course it is. Of course. And then when they respond, it'll be used as propaganda by a bunch of commies and so forth. And so these two groups will begin squabbling. It'll begin to look a lot more like the mid-1930s in Europe again. Well, that's just great. You know, maybe Merkel means for this to happen. Maybe the reason she's so on board with this, she knows it'll cause social alienation. They can have like a Fourth Reich. She wants to be the next Führer of Germany or something. I don't think so, but maybe. Now, you never know. We must keep an eye on the German threat because World War I and II, you know, it's a difficult issue. No, I'm just joking. But at the same time, these people have to be screwed up in the head to think that this is a good idea. For John Kerry, who lives in his lily-white gated community of millionaires and billionaires, to complain about the existence of walls and borders while walling off his mansion from the outside world to make sure that nobody tries to get onto his property without wearing, you know, $1,000 suit, that's hypocrisy. Surely even his fans can see that it is. Because you see, when you look at an evangelical minister who drives the sports car or rides in a limo and has the $250,000 this and the $10 million that and the gold watch and the gold cross necklace and everything, when you look at that, you criticize them, of course. You say that's hypocritical. The Bible says to give to the poor. You're talking about charity, and you're living in a $10 million home. That doesn't seem like it's reasonable. It doesn't make sense. It's self-contradicting. Yes, that's the point. Now apply that same logic to some billionaire like John Kerry living in a gated community among only white folks, because God forbid that a black person should wander onto John Kerry's property without being a janitor or a cook or a maid, and you will see that it is the same variant of hypocrisy. It's exactly the same. There is no difference. It goes beyond the left-right bullshit political spectrum that the average person is locked into. I've been trying to deprogram my subscribers from this spectrum for years. Seems to be working. I see an increase in the number of people who generally understand this. Last election it was like 90% of people were like, oh, I'm settling for Romney because Obama's so bad. Oh, well, I'm voting for Obama because Romney's so bad. I think people are finally getting the reason why I said that was a bad idea in reasoning. I voted for Ron Paul. I think people are ultimately beginning to understand why that's a bad idea. By the way, I'd say the same about this election. I don't think Trump will go far enough. I don't think if Sanders were nominated, it would be a good idea. I think heart in the right place, fundamentally good ideas on some things, but doesn't go far enough. We need change. And I don't mean, oh, hope and change. Change you can believe in. That's bullshit. That's just propaganda. It's the same two retarded parties continuing to bicker. Yeah, you have a paradigm shift. Trump will probably win. We'll see what happens. If he does a good job, if he can do half of the things that I agree with him on, then I'll be pleasantly surprised. I'll be very happy, and I'll vote for him if he comes up for re-election. Of course I will. At that point, I'll say, well, Trump did it. I was wrong. But I don't think that I'll be wrong. I think it'll be too little too late for our republic. Even if he does implement some of his admittedly mild reforms, I don't think it's enough. And for an idiot like John Kerry, horseface, mooseface, fucking John Kerry the billionaire, in his gated community to whine about gates and walls and we should be building bridges instead. The only bridge he ever built was across the moat around his home that's there to keep Spanish-speaking individuals from coming in who aren't cooking tacos for him. I don't have any respect for John Kerry whatsoever. because these people are stupid. They don't know what they're doing. They're corrupt. They're bought off idiots. That's exactly why do you think things in this world are so screwed up? That's the kind of person who we've put into positions of power, sadly enough. Can you think tens of millions of people voted for him to be the president of the United States? That's sad. That's about all. Peace out.